Okay, well this is going to be a different type of video. What you see obviously in the shot is a cardboard box, and then in the background you see what some of you that are fairly astute when it comes to Swedish Beauties will recognize, even though the color is different, as a case for a Husqvarna Viking and most likely a green machine. This was just delivered yesterday. And I have to say, my first impression as I looked at the exterior box that this machine was in the case, I was not overly impressed. There were a lot of buckle points on it. There was just a lot of signs that the box had not afforded a real high level of protection. And I was hopeful as I began to open it up that I would find that the machine, both in the case and around the case, had been packed sufficiently, but it really wasn't. And you can see they kind of hand scribbled on the outside of the box, fragile, etc., etc. But it, I mean, the Postal Service and UPS and other providers that ship packages all the time are really not going to take time, as they're bustling through to move thousands of packages a day, no doubt, to say, oh, this says fragile, I've got to take extra time with it. They're under a real tight schedule, and obviously they're gonna, we've got to cushion our side by making sure that we're taking the precautions to protect our vintage machines, which this eBay seller really didn't do a spectacular job of doing. And let me give you a little background on this and kind of rewind a little bit and tell you what's the story behind all this. Well, a gentleman from out in Boston, Massachusetts was watching this machine on eBay and really thought that it would be a good buy, but contacted me and said, if I win this auction, can I send the machine via the seller directly to you instead of them shipping it to me and then me having to turn around and try to get that machine over to your workshop? I said, yeah, absolutely, that's fine. I've never actually had that happen before exactly like that. Most cases, people will buy a machine on eBay, they'll get it home, and either immediately or short afterwards they'll find there are some issues with it, and then they'll go through the process of packing that machine up and getting it to my workshop. Mike from Boston, Massachusetts, in my opinion, had great foresight in wanting to eliminate that extra step and say to that seller, if I win your auction, I want that machine to be shipped directly to Scott's workshop in Wisconsin. So I think that's way cool, and that says a lot about the planning and foresight of Mike from Boston, Massachusetts. So definitely 2 thumbs up there. But that seller, not probably being extremely knowledgeable or wanting to take the extra time, didn't do a spectacular job of protecting Mike's machine as it was traveling to my workshop. Let me show you inside, and this is really the extent of the packing materials and protection that this eBay seller put into motion to protect Mike's Swedish Beauty. Now, if you're not schooled in the area of vintage sewing machines, you might just look at that thing and say, well, it's made out of metal, it's inside of a case, how much do I really need to do to protect this machine? You need to do a lot, because like anything, as it's being jostled and bumped and moved around over hundreds of miles or thousands of miles, even though that machine is inside of a case, it's going to be getting banged around and jostled around and shifted, and can sustain damage just as well if it were not in a case. And this tissue paper style stuff that a lot of the eBay sellers use does not afford much cushion, if any, when it comes to protecting that machine in the case and also protecting that case inside of this cardboard box. That's why, as I've shared with all of you, my packing method is radically different. So I'm not going to dwell on this anymore. I'll just say that I was kind of disappointed that an experienced eBay seller that is charging a customer a lot of money for a Swedish Beauty is not going to do a better job of protecting that machine. So let me move this to the side. And now we'll take a look at the case and take a look at the machine that eventually is going to be shipped or reshipped from Wisconsin out to Boston, Massachusetts. So I'm going to bring my camera shot up a little bit, and you can see we have, any of you that are fairly familiar with the Swedish Beauties, you're going to know that this is kind of an unconventional case. It is an original case, but the coloring on it and the design on this case are very different from most of the traditional Husqvarna cases that you've seen on this channel. This brown and kind of this checkered or dotted appearance on the outside, you're not going to see that a whole lot. It's kind of a unique case, so that's kind of neat. The case overall appears to be in fairly good shape. I'm guessing that the eBay pictures reflected that some of this outside cloth material is separating from the case. Here we've actually got it totally missing, and the little foam that kind of goes underneath this covering is actually sticking through. So there is damage to the case that I assume was reflected in the eBay photos. Again, I've not seen this eBay listing. I didn't see the photos that Mike would have looked at as he was weighing whether or not to purchase this machine. But as I turn it on the workbench, all in all, the case appears to be in relatively good condition, except for some of that material separating, which is not uncommon. Not uncommon at all with these machines. This tag, by the way, that you can kind of see in the shot is a tag that I put on all of my machines when they arrive, whether they're dropped off to the workshop, whether they're shipped here, however they end up arriving at my workshop. I always put a tag that has all the vital data. If customers express concerns, specific concerns about the machine, they're annotated on this tag, the date that it arrived, the customer's contact information, etc., etc., etc. So I'm kind of keeping that concealed just because I do want to respect the privacy of Mike from Boston, Massachusetts. So if any of you are stalkers and you're going to try to find out Mike from Boston, Massachusetts, I would venture a guess that there's probably more than one Mike that lives in Boston, Massachusetts. So no worries there. All right, let me turn this around and let's take a look at this machine for the first time. So this is also good. This is I love it when these springs are still intact. A lot of the springs will break just from the repetitive process of that owner opening and closing, opening and closing. These are still really, really good as far as their response. So the other thing you'll notice right away is that this is a different color than a lot of those light mint colored ones that you'll see on my channel. This is more of the forest green color, different patina, different branding on the front of the machine. Also, the controls are different as well. The machine did come with 2 extra cams. There's one in the back of the machine as well. These were not in the bags. These, I have to confess, I did take a peek in here, and this stuff was just loose in the case, kind of floating around. And so I did gather all of it up and put it into these bags for Mike, just so we can have some sort of an inventory of what came with the machine, so that if it was listed in detail on the eBay listing, we know whether or not Mike got everything. But again, the level of care that some people that are selling vintage sewing machines continues to surprise me. I mean, it's fairly common sense, in my opinion, that if you're going to have these plastic cams, you're going to have all of these attachments, and even a twin needle floating around inside of this case, that metal against paint is never a good idea. So, and also just to control the movement of these plastic cams, which are extremely valuable. You don't want them banging around in the case, maybe getting chipped up or damaged in some other way, considering there was really no padding other than a little bit of tissue paper stuffed around this machine that you saw in that box that this machine arrived in. So, again, if you buy a machine directly from me, you're never going to find attachments or cams or other things like that floating around inside of the case, banging around the machine, scratching the machine, and other things like that. And I'm not being critical of Mike in making that remark. I'm saying that sellers are very different when it comes to how they prep a machine, prepare a machine, pack a machine, all of that stuff. So, I really commend Mike, and maybe he can reflect that in his feedback, as he will most likely write feedback for this seller on eBay, that the things that I point out that are concerns about this machine, if they weren't obvious in that listing. And I've highlighted a couple of those areas already. And this is just one of them. Pack all of your stuff so it's not going to be banging around in the case, especially a twin needle that's going to be moving around in that case as I found it in here, not restricted in movement in any way. So, all right, I'm going to set this stuff to the side. Also, pack your foot controllers. Foot controllers are a very delicate piece of the working machinery of that machine, and you want to, as you've seen me do in my packing videos, you want to protect this as much as the machine, probably even more so, because most of the components of this foot controller are going to be plastic, and plastic getting banged around inside of a case over hundreds or thousands of miles is definitely not a good idea. You also notice that this foot controller is going to be a little bit shorter. It's almost indistinguishable that it's a little bit shorter than a lot of the other foot controllers, and that's because this is for a Type 21. And as I look at the nomenclature plate on the back, interestingly, it's labeled Electrolux. But the nomenclature data, the voltage, and the model number, which is a 140, are correct. So at some point, Electrolux must have worked with Husqvarna in manufacturing or producing some of their foot controllers, because that's how this one is labeled. So I'm going to set this to the side. Overall, the wiring, I would say, on this foot controller looks like it's okay. It's very dirty, and the plug-in point as well looks to be in good working order. You'll notice on this plug-in point, if you can see in the shot, instead of having the blade style plug-in, it's going to have these tube style plug-ins, almost like you would use on appliances in Europe to plug in the outlets. It's going to have a tube style plug-in versus the blade. And I won't know until I fire this thing up what's working and what's not working. But as I've said in other videos, dirt is not the friend of our vintage sewing machines. And this seller, as far as I can see, didn't take a lot of care in making sure that this was a clean machine. So that's going to be a lot of the time that I invest in Mike's machine, in getting it to the proper level of cleanliness, and all the other parts that play into that, the lubrication and the inspections of the wiring and everything else that I'll be doing to make sure when I eventually pack this machine properly to go to Boston, Massachusetts, that it's electrically, mechanically, and aesthetically in proper condition. Right now it certainly is not, as far as I can see. Okay, so Mike also got an extension bed with this. I'm going to carefully lean this against this machine and kind of zoom in on it a little bit. And again, whenever I see a machine that arrives this dirty, it immediately throws up some red flags as far as how I'm going to approach this machine. As I kind of zoom around a little bit, you can kind of see, hopefully in the shot, you can kind of see just not a lot of care. I mean, it would have taken some simple wax or general purpose cleaner just to clean over this extension bed, which, when you look at a Husqvarna Viking green machine like this, a Swedish Beauty, one of the most striking, jaw-dropping appointments of the machine is that extension bed. So, if I wanted my customer to be awed as soon as they open this case, I'm not starting with the right foot forward in presenting an extension bed like this to a customer that's purchased the machine from eBay. So again, I don't want to sound unduly critical, but I am an admitted perfectionist when it comes to machines being just right, and this one is definitely not impressing me yet. But the good news is, again, Mike had the foresight to to say to that seller on eBay, if I win this auction, I do not want the machine shipped to me. I want you to ship it directly to Scott's workshop in Wisconsin so he can give it a detailed once-over. So again, I have to commend Mike for his foresight in taking that step. A lot of times I come into the picture long after someone has bought a machine on eBay or on Craigslist or some other venue, and they're already beginning to notice these issues, and that seller is long gone, and that feedback may have even been put on, based on a quick glance that they may have given it. They may have given that person positive feedback and thumbs up and all that kind of stuff, and then all of a sudden the machine comes to me and I highlight a long list of issues, either electrical, mechanical, or otherwise, with that machine, and that poor customer that bought the machine on eBay or Craigslist or wherever suddenly gets the bad news delivered that it ain't as they thought it was. So, and I'm saying ain't intentionally, by the way. So here's the front of Mike's machine. Again, you're going to see differences on this machine. You're going to see that the stitch length control is different. The overall layout of the machine is going to be a little bit different on this Type 21 of this era. It's going to be a little bit of an earlier machine than the mint colored ones that you typically see. And again, you can see the overall appearance of the machine, again, from the ones that you've seen me introduce on my channel, is strikingly different. It's very dirty. It seems like it's not well kept. Has a lot of looks like old oil on the different surfaces of the machine. Again, it's just not a machine that I would. Looks like we have a little bit of damage to the top, which may well have been there in the photos. You can see it right there between the 3 oiling points on top. Also, it looks like as we go over to this end of the machine, near the faceplate, that we have a very weird adaptation of a thread guide, which is normally on these green machines. Every green machine I've ever had has a single band piece on the top where you're going to thread it from the back to the front. This one has 2 separate pieces that I don't know if it's, I'll have to look at it in more detail. I don't know if it's makeshift or if, again, as I discover machines, again, I've had a lot of Husqvarnas on this workbench, but this just doesn't look quite right. But maybe it's one of those adaptations again that I'll discover was something that they did to certain models that were Type 21s. But I'll have to see if it even has a functional application, if it's going to work correctly. So, but that is odd, isn't it? Any of you that follow me faithfully, I'm sure that you've never seen, because I've never introduced a Husqvarna that has 2 separate thread guides like that. That's very, very unusual. All right, let me come out just a little bit so that we can turn this machine and look at the faceplate. Oh, you know what? Before I do that, let's see if we actually have a bobbin carrier in here. That might be helpful. Let's drop down. Again, I'm pleased to see that this door, this hinge door, is not damaged. The way it was packed rather poorly. These sometimes get snapped off when they're being shipped. So we do have a bobbin carrier. It looks to be the correct type. I won't know if it's a working bobbin carrier, but it does have the 2 screw sets, the one for adjusting the tension on the bobbin carrier, and then also the set screw to hold that band in place. And that does appear to be the correct bobbin as well. So that's good news. And the overall raceway appears to be intact as well. So that's also good news. We have all 3 screws. Yay, yay, yay. All right. And we come up to here. We do have our needle plate. Obviously, it needs a little bit of attention and cleaning. It's interesting, kind of the contrast between those 2, isn't it? Almost looks like that was added. Again, I'll know when I really get into the machine more in depth. We do have our thread guide there. That's good. And we have our thread guide all the way down here just above the needle. You have to watch for things like this because you know, either the inexperienced or unknowledgeable seller doesn't know that there should be a thread guide there, and they're just assuming that the machine is as it should be. So again, one of the benefits of buying from my workbench, you know you're going to get the correct stuff. That's my technical term, stuff. All right, so now we're looking in the faceplate area. You can see the presser foot spring is present. Believe it or not, I've got machines that actually do not have a spring inside of that casing, and that doesn't do well for giving you presser foot pressure, that's for sure. Don't see anything evidently broken, but I'll know better once I start digging into the machine. Going over to the faceplate, it's hinged properly. Both hinges are intact. This is another, when something is poorly packed, this is sometimes falls victim to shipping damage. It either gets broken off or one of the areas gets cracked, because this is all cast metal, the body of this Husqvarna, so it is very fragile when it comes to direct impact. Another interesting thing, and again, nothing leads me to believe that this is not the original faceplate, but every single faceplate that I've ever seen and that I recall presenting on this channel always will have that branding mark of made in Sweden inside of the faceplate, and I do not see it on this Type 21. So that is either you know, that's just the way it is. But again, I've never seen it like that, so it's something I'm gonna probably be a little bit I'll probably scrutinize that a little bit just to make sure that it's not an aftermarket excuse me, or aftermarket replacement or anything like that. All right, let me turn this around so we can look at the back finally. And I'm already seeing an issue that concerns me a lot. I won't reveal it to you right away. I'll start on this end and we'll kind of work our way that direction. So I'm not seeing any cracking or, again, depending on, pardon me, depending on what the pictures look like with the eBay listing, I just want to give Mike a very clear view of what the machine looks like upon arrival, so if there's any major discrepancies, he can take that up with the seller and get it some sort of appropriate response. So here again you can see that very odd thread guide system across the top, these two separate pieces that have been attached. Very unusual. Alright, as we start to move across, you can now see, hopefully, what I was concerned about, and that is that rear door that is hinged on the bottom and on the top, we can actually see one of those pins exposed, and it's because you can see there that part of the plastic, or excuse me, part of the metal housing is actually gone. So that pin has nothing to hold it in place, and as a result it's not hanging evenly. And what that means is that door in its current state, and even with some intervention, may not close properly and may have a tendency to pop open unless that entire piece on the back, from basically here where you see Viking, and then including that door and those spool pins there, that entire piece is a single unit, and we may have to look at replacing that entire unit so that it's as it should be. Let me go ahead and open that door. We'll just look inside, see if we see anything real obvious or out of sorts. So it looks like the belts, the main drive belt on the balance wheel. Let me drop this camera shot down a little bit. The main belt, which you won't be able to see in this shot, by the way, just on the far left there, that main drive belt that powers the balance wheel feels kind of gritty on the inside. I'll take a closer inspection of it to make sure that it's it's good to go. But yeah, it looks like it may need to be replaced. Here's one of our timing belts right here. It looks like it's in decent condition. Again, you know, once I inspect it more closely, I'll be able to know. And it looks like we have cam A in there, and the other two cams that I showed you that I bagged up that were floating around in the case, this is cam B and C. So Mike has cam A, B, and C for his Type 21, which is good. So, you know, again, I don't want to sound totally negative, but I am pointing out all the discrepancies just so Mike is aware, because all he could base his buying decision on are the pictures that seller presented that compelled Mike to decide to make that purchase. So if anything is way off key, this will alert Mike to that fact. Now down here you can see again our plug-in point for the foot control on the right there. Is that peg style rather than the blade style, which coincides with the foot controller we have, which again is branded Electrolux, which is kind of interesting. This is for turning our light on and off, and these are notorious for, especially when you're shipping machines, if they're not padded and protected properly. Even if they're in that case, these get snapped off or cracked. So the good news is that this one looks like it's in good condition, in spite of not being packed really well. Well, let me just say it honestly, being packed poorly. And here's our nomenclature plate, made in Sweden, Type 21, 1.5 amps. Now, as some of you may already know, and there's our royal crest. I love that royal crest, don't you? As some of you already know, the Type 21s, many of them behind this motor casing right here, are going to have that Westinghouse American-made motor that was installed in the Swedish factory. And I won't know until I get that cover off as to whether or not Mike's Type 21 has a traditional Swedish motor or whether it has that Westinghouse motor. Now, as I said in that one comparative video that I did, knowing Husqvarna Viking and how persnickety and meticulous they were about their machines, they would never have accepted Westinghouse motors as a viable solution for their Type 21s if they had not done significant vetting and really gone over it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that would serve the machine properly and serve their customers properly. It's just a different motor. It's American made. It has different motor brushes. The interior architecture of the motor is slightly different than the original Swedish ones. So it's just good to know what kind of motor you have. That way, in the future, if Mike ever has to get the motor brushes replaced, he knows if it is a Westinghouse motor, he needs to look for that brush for that motor versus the brush that would go with a standard Swedish motor, because if he orders the standard Swedish motor brushes, they're going to be too big to fit in the wells. He won't even be able to get them into that Westinghouse motor because they're noticeably smaller. So now let's go ahead and turn this and look at the final side of the machine. Again, if I bring the camera shot up a little bit and close that door, you're going to see again from this distance just how off kilter it is. You can't even close it. You have all that space up here and it's just kind of dangling in the wind, unfortunately. All right, so let me turn the machine now. We'll look at the bobbin winding side. And again, I won't know what condition that smaller belt is that connects to the pulley and directly to the motor until I take these sides off. Now this is a much different look than most of the other Swedish beauties that you've seen on this channel. The bobbin winding assembly is different. You've got a different actuator knob above it. And just the overall look and lay of the land is very different. But again, this is all original equipment. And it just goes to show again, as you look at machines, how during different stages of productions and going from one production year to another, they can be very different with subtle changes. Just as I recently highlighted with the machine that went out to Oklahoma, the 301, that machine had a metal worm gear that drove the balance wheel, and I had never seen that before. With all the machines that I've handled over decades of working on machines, and I continue to discover nuances with models that I've touched so many times. So you never stop learning, right? So go ahead and turn this machine back around for a frontal view. And you know, what I'm going to say is that, again, I have to commend Mike from Boston, Massachusetts, for having the foresight to make that buying decision to purchase a machine on eBay and saying to that seller, I don't want to see the machine. I want you to send it directly to Scott's workshop and let him put it under the microscope, and then he'll ship it on to me. So again, I would encourage others, if you're determined to try to purchase a machine other than from my workbench, which is entirely your right, consider the approach that Mike took in making that purchase, but then saying to that seller, send it to Scott's workshop so that he can put it under the microscope before I ever see the machine, before I ever sew on it, and make sure that it's mechanically, electrically, and aesthetically the type of machine, the dream machine, the Swedish Beauty that I've always hoped to have in my home. Because that's really why most people will save up and skimp their pennies and just, really budget themselves so that they can afford to buy one of these machines. And if that's one of your dreams for 2019, is that you want to own a Swedish Beauty, you can either take Mike's approach and check on eBay to see what you can find, and then consider the option of having that seller send it to me so that I can make sure that it's good to go. Or you can just buy a Swedish Beauty directly from me. I have a couple of them that are available right now that are ones that I could fully restore for you. They're already functional. They're already ready to sew, but they're not finalized to the level that I like to finalize my machines before I release it to the new owner and let them begin to enjoy it. Again, that's just my approach. A lot of people would say, do you have to really be that particular, that persnickety to, put it under the microscope? Can't you just, use it the way it is? Well, you can, but then you risk a number of things. Number one is you risk having a machine that doesn't deliver at the level that it should, and after waiting all that time and scrimping all of those pennies and budgeting yourself, scrimping, skimping, whatever, you're saving a lot of money to buy that machine because it's your dream machine, and then you're disappointed because it doesn't do what you saw my machines do on the YouTube channel, or it just doesn't deliver that beautiful stitch that you've seen as well through innumerable sew-offs on my channel also. So, don't go down a path of setting yourself up to be disappointed. Be as smart as Mike was in saying, you know what, I found a machine I really like on eBay. I got it for the price that I think is fair. Now I'm going to make sure that machine is just as it should be by sending it on to Scott. So consider that. I think it's a brilliant approach on Mike's part, and I have to commend him. And I'm going to have a lot of fun getting this machine just right before I pack it up in a proper manner and ship it on to him in Boston, Massachusetts. So a different kind of video here. I'm giving you a chance to see a machine that was purchased on eBay and was shipped by that seller directly to my workshop. And you've seen some of the challenges that can come along with a purchase like that. So I'll just say it. Buyer beware. Don't set yourself up for disappointment. Don't set yourself up for a lot of frustration. If you're going to buy on eBay, if you're going to buy somewhere else, have that seller send me the machine so I can make sure it's right. And you can sit down and have that dream fulfilled by having a Swedish Beauty that does all the things that inspired you to want to have one that you've seen on this channel. Okay? All right. Well, God bless you guys, and stay tuned for other great videos like this. And I'm going to get Mike's Type 21 into the queue. I've got some other Husqvarnas that I've got to give my attention to first, one of which I actually took off of the workbench so I could put this one on there and kind of introduce it to you as a recent arrival from eBay land. And then I've got this other machine over here that is actually owned by a local lady. It belonged to her daughter, if I remember correctly. And sadly, her daughter passed away. And she wants me to make sure this machine is right. And then she's going to either give me first right of refusal if I want to buy it, because it's an original owner machine, or I'm going to prep it so that it's just right for a new owner to enjoy it as it should be. So, but again, you know, if you have a Swedish Beauty in your crosshairs and you're saying, you know what, I've heard Scott's videos, I know that I'm kind of rolling the dice on this one. You know, I just talked to a gentleman out in Hawaii yesterday. I spent an hour on the phone with him, and we communicated until late last night. He shared an eBay listing with me, and I gave him a list of close to 10 red flags that were legitimate red flags about that machine, that otherwise, if you only looked at the pictures as, you know, kind of a semi-untrained eye, you know, it would look like a good buy. So now he's going to take a different path, and most likely will be getting a 201-2 directly from me, and then I'll be shipping it to Hawaii, which will be a lot of fun. I mean, I've shipped machines all over the world. I don't know that I've ever sent a machine to Hawaii before,